Hello friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. This is Henry Seltzer. Boy, we've got another really intense lunation coming up this weekend, as they have been so many this year already, and the times have reflected that. It's been a very intense ride, especially lately with the candidacies winding up, with the convention coming up next month, the two conventions here in the United States, with the British exit coming up in Europe, which affects the whole European Union. So it's been an incredibly intense springtime, as reflected in these lunations that have been very powerful. And we'll take a look at this next one and see what we can see and how we can feel into our own personal response to the transformational times that we are in right now. And before I go to the chart, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you get the chance to do that. We appreciate it. Well, taking a look at the chart of this full moon that's coming up early Monday morning here on the West Coast, you can see that the Sun and Moon are aligned with the vertical axis of this chart, which is the natural chart that we're using to show this the best way for everybody, which is having Aries on the ascendant and then 0 degrees of Aries. And then we have the Capricorn and the Cancer vertical axis, which is reflected by the fact that the Sun is almost in Cancer, 29 degrees and 30 minutes of Gemini versus the Moon in the same degree of Sagittarius. So we're looking at actually the summer solstice, which takes place half a degree later, namely half a day later, later in the day on Monday. So Monday is also the summer solstice, which is a very important time, as important as the winter solstice, really, which is considered the harbinger for the entire year. So this is an important chart to look at from a number of standpoints, because this full moon comes after the June 4th new moon that was so powerful that had that mutable grand cross. And as we'll see, there's a grand cross in this chart as well. So it really kind of reflects back on the whole cycle, this whole 30-day cycle that we're in the midst of from June till July 4th. Now, on the other hand, being the summer solstice, half a day later, this chart also represents what we might see in the last half of this year, starting from the December time frame and heading into the end of the year. Additionally, as far as this year goes, we do have a close conjunction of Eris and Uranus. Right now they're in the same degree of 23. Uranus is about to cross to 24, but then they both retrograde. They stay within a degree for the rest of the year. So when I mention the rest of the year, I do want to mention that this Eris-Uranus conjunction, a lot of people don't know too much about Eris, but Eris is proving to be very powerful in charts, and being conjunct Uranus, it brings Uranus to the fore. So we're seeing unexpected, surprising events, strange twists in everything, including the political climate that we're seeing right now. For example, we have seen already that even though on the Democratic side, even though Hillary and Bernie have been close to each other, Hillary has pulled ahead to the point where she's declared the candidate, but on the other hand, Bernie feels like he's fighting for some principles that are really important. He wants to see the platform reflect that. Who knows what will happen at the Democratic convention later in July when this all goes down. And then again, who knows what's going to happen in the Republican National Convention, which happens earlier in July, being the fact that the presumptive candidate there, Donald Trump, is considered by many in his own party to be unfit for office, and certainly by most of the Democrats. So there's a big bunch of issues going on in the political scene in Europe as well, with the British exit vote, which is going to be huge if they do vote to refrain, to remove themselves from the European Union. It's going to affect all of Europe. So we're seeing quite a bit of strange things happening, and this has been the case all year, but let's look at this specific, the Grand Cross that we spoke about as far as the June 4th new moon is still with us. Why is that? Well, we have the Sun is in the last degree of Gemini. And Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is right there in Gemini also at 11 degrees. Well, opposite at 11 degrees we have Saturn, pretty close exact square. We have Neptune still. And then we have Jupiter, which has drifted a few more degrees along, and is so not in a very close, tight Grand Cross that we were seeing that it was, but nevertheless, it's still in a very important position. It is exactly conjunct to the nodal axis, to the north node of the moon. And not only that, it is quintile to Venus, as you can see, examining things, examining that, that mark there, which indicates the exact 72-degree aspect between Jupiter and Venus, about half a degree off. And then again, there's a parallel still with its opposite placement here of Neptune. So if we were to take a look at the declinations, we see that 6 degrees 44 minutes, or 6.7 degrees, is still within a degree of the 7 degree 49 minute placement as far as declination of Neptune. Incidentally, declinationally, we have a rather strong factor in the Mars retrograde. Mars is just winding up its retrograde. It's going to stay in the same degree of 23 of Scorpio right up until the end of the month, when it does station on the 29th of June to direct motion. As it goes through this, it's becoming something that's much more powerful to take into account, because stationing, slowing down, acts like an outer planet, not moving too fast at all. And look, it's got a perfect inconjunct to this Uranus conjunction that I've been describing. So this is a very important placement of passionate Mars, angry and sometimes militant, and moving retrograde, which makes us turn this inside and examine ourselves more closely. That's really a lot of what's going on right now. We're examining ourselves more closely. The other thing about this Mars that's important to recognize is, in this configuration, it's almost to the 21st degree of declination, which is where Pluto is at 21.0. So Pluto stays 21 degrees all through the end of this month, for the next week or so. And Mars, look at Mars, Mars is 21 now because it's almost to 21, and then it becomes 21 degrees in 1 minute, 2 minutes by the end of the month. So these are very, very close. Mars is moving slowly, Pluto is moving slowly, very close parallel between Mars and Pluto. You can only imagine with Mars and Pluto in combination like this, also with Jupiter trining Pluto, we have a very strong presence of a death and rebirth situation. We have a very strong, intense placement of this Uranus-Pluto square, which is the bigger picture, which lasts until 2020. So this whole decade of what I call the turbulent teens has had Uranus-Pluto, and we're dealing with it now more than ever, even though the exact hit is gone. It's important to recognize that the exact hit of the square, which there were 7 exact hits, the last one being a year ago in 2015, March of 2015 actually. But that doesn't mean that it's over, and we're still reaping the benefits and the difficulties of this placement. We're seeing where we're stuck, we're seeing where we have to break something loose and make a change, or go on with the dysfunctional situation. That's true personally for every one of us. It's true for the society at large. It's a very intense transformational time right now, as echoed also by the Saturn-Neptune square, which a lot of astrologers have been talking about. It's finally winding up. Well, not yet, because with Saturn being retrograde, it will retrograde back and then cross one more time. But this is actually the timing of the Saturn-Pluto, and as you all know, I'm sure, Saturn represents limits. Neptune represents boundlessness, no limits, looking beyond the physical. So we have the physical and we have beyond the physical in contrast to each other, and triggered by these Grand Cross lunations of June 4th and now coming up June 20th. So that's very important to recognize also. We have a compassionate response that comes in these tough times, and we feel it very strongly. And we have a liberal response indicated by Jupiter in opposition to Neptune, very strong feeling of sky's the limit, let's take it where it needs to go, let's be idealistic in the way we look at things. And we can say also, looking at the Jupiter-Neptune opposition, a very strong placement that, this is a feeling the sky's the limit, let's take it to the ideal situation wherever we can take it. And so that's supporting Bernie Sanders, for example, and his saying we need to do things a lot differently. We need to address income inequality. We need to have free college tuition. We need to have a minimum wage that works. All the things that he's promoting for the rank and file, the masses, represented by this Jupiter positivism. And there's still a strong impulse for that, as well as the impulse to have to shut it down, to be conservative in our approach, to put limits on things, to stop going too far out there and really reel it in and recognize that sometimes the established ways are the ways that work, and we have to recognize that. So we have these contrasting viewpoints as represented in our political scene, as represented by every one of us feeling, where do we need to draw the line? Where do we need to expand beyond previous high watermarks of idealism and go for it? And that's the choice that's facing each one of us now. Well, another thing about this full moon that we want to take into account is the presence of Chiron. Chiron is activated by both Eris and Uranus, not too far off from a perfect semi-sextile, and it's activated as well by this position of Mars, which trines the 25-degree mark where Chiron is located in Pisces. So we know very distinctly that there is a lot of fear coming up, as well there might be with these situations that we're dealing with. And for each one of us as well, this is one place where we do, talking about Chiron, talking about the depth of what's inside us to have angst over, to recognize where we're afraid because of what's happened in our past. Usually it comes from early childhood. So the Chiron presence is very important to recognize here because it is what holds us back. And this full moon actually represents a strong hit, T-square, to this Chiron. So it's very important to recognize that as well as part of this full moon. And you can just see where it is you're stuck. You can see, gee, am I doing the right thing here? Am I doing what's necessary for myself? Or am I holding back based on fear? Fear of going off the tracks, fear of unexplored territory psychologically for myself. Very important to recognize that Chiron is in this whole picture. And let us not forget that Jupiter, in conjunction with the North Node, is a very powerful symbol for moving ahead no matter what. Damn the torpedoes, go for it, make it happen, as is this Uranus conjunction. Uranus is favored, and so we see a lot of unexpected results, unexpected enlightenment. When we're in difficult situations, the thing is, what can we learn from it? If we have to pay the price and go through the pain and the difficulty, what can we actually take to the bank, to the psychological bank, and learn from it? And that's where Uranus comes in. And then Uranus enacting on Eris also brings a total sense of rebellious, going for it, making it happen no matter what. This is forging new territory, breaking new ground for ourselves according to what we most deeply believe. Because Eris turns out to be taking your soul intention quite seriously and making something happen, even if it's disruptive, even if it goes against the grain of where the established society's at or your established ways. Getting out of your rut. Time to do that. Really important times. Well, that's all we have time for today. I would like to recommend resources, as I always do. And one of the best is Stephen Arroyo's book, Astrology, Karma, and Transformation. I bring that up because of these intensely transformative times, and he's terrific on all the archetypes, the outer planet archetypes especially. And then for Saturn, of course, Liz Green's book, Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil, is a terrific book. Not just the downside of Saturn, where it's representing limitations and difficulties, and oh my God, Saturn's on my sun again, I have to deal with this, but also what can be the lessons learned, what can be the transformational effect of taking Saturn seriously as a positive factor, as the universe is trying to help, trying to get us out of where we're stuck. And then as far as the Uranus-Pluto square as harbinger of these times that we're in, this decade of the turbulent teens from 2010 till 2020, Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche, unparalleled. He goes through history, all the examples of not only Uranus and Pluto in combination, but other combinations such as Saturn, Pluto that we saw in 2001 in 9/11. So that's good. And then my book on Eris has been very well received. It's taking this new planetary archetype quite seriously and looking at it through history as well, and looking at it in example charts of famous people and showing that it has an upside. It's contentious, but it's also for a purpose of establishing a new order, something that only the individual can bring. As Jung was careful to point out, Carl Jung, that every transformation of society, every change, every step forward comes from the individual. He said that in his works. And then also the time passages software, very important. It gives you an interactive look at all these things. You can click and get interpretations for all the planets, all the combinations of planets that we've been describing. So that's it for now. Again, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can. It does help us out quite a bit to get those numbers and to see who's watching. And have a great day. Have a great couple of weeks.